There are worlds that collapse under the weight of their own ideals, and others that contort themselves to uphold them. This is the latter, a society that solved one tragedy only by birthing another. In the aftermath of the Great Moral Realignment, humanity believed it had finally reconciled compassion with consequence, life with justice. But beneath the celebration lay a quiet fracture, a tension between what was promised and what was demanded. This is the story of a world that tried to perfect its ethics, only to discover that every solution carries a shadow, and every life preserved may require another to bend, break, or bear the cost. In the world that emerged after the Great Moral Realignment, unwanted pregnancies were no longer tragedies. Advances in medicine and social engineering ensured that every child born from an unwanted pregnancy grew into a flourishing adult, healthy, fulfilled, and capable of contributing richly to society. Pro-life and abolitionist movements celebrated this achievement as the ultimate vindication of their cause. Yet beneath this triumph lay a darker truth. Every unwanted pregnancy carried a hidden cost. 4 years after giving birth, the mother would inevitably fall into a state indistinguishable from brain death. Her body remained alive, but her consciousness vanished, as if the very act of carrying an unwanted child extracted a delayed and devastating toll. For years, this phenomenon baffled scientists and ethicists alike. Then, in a breakthrough hailed as miraculous, researchers discovered that the mother's consciousness could be restored, but only through a process that mirrored pregnancy itself. The child, now 4 years old, possessed a unique biological signature capable of reigniting the mother's dormant neural pathways. To activate it, the child had to be connected to the mother through a Ninamont procedure that replicated the physical burdens, hormonal upheavals, and bodily harms of pregnancy. It was not symbolic. It was literal. The child would endure nausea, organ strain, bone stress, and the full spectrum of gestational suffering, all while confined to a medical facility. Most mothers, anticipating the catastrophic fate awaiting them, chose adoption shortly after birth. They hoped their children would be raised by families better equipped to provide stability and love. But adoption did not sever the biological tether. When the inevitable collapse came 4 years later, the state intervened. Because the technology to restore the mother existed, and because society had decided that restoring her was a moral imperative, the adopted child was legally required to undergo the Ninamont restorative procedure. Hospitals became filled with rows of unconscious mothers and small children strapped into life support harnesses, their bodies forced into a cycle of suffering they could not understand. Public debate raged, but the law remained firm. Advocates argued that the mothers were not truly gone, they were merely suspended, waiting to return to the lives, relationships, and futures they once had. To let them die, they said, would be to abandon a recoverable person. Opponents countered that forcing a child to endure the harms of pregnancy was a grotesque violation of bodily autonomy, one that no civilized society should tolerate. Yet the state insisted that even though the child's existence hadn't intentionally caused the mother's condition, the child bore a unique responsibility to remedy it given the intrinsic worth of the mother. The dependency created obligation of the society to uphold or be culpable in the essential loss of life. The reliance created duty, and so the cycle continued. Children grew up knowing that their earliest memories would include months of pain and confinement, endured for the sake of a woman they barely knew. Some accepted this as a solemn rite of passage. Others resented it deeply, feeling that their bodies had been conscripted into a moral system designed without their consent. And as each generation repeated the pattern, society became increasingly divided over whether the restoration mandate was a noble affirmation of life or a monstrous distortion of responsibility. In this world, the question was no longer whether life was valuable, but whether the cost of preserving it could ever be justified when paid with the body of another. In the end, the world that prided itself on valuing every life was forced to confront a truth it had long refused to name: that no moral system remains pure when it is built on the bodies of the unwilling. The cycle endured, children suffering for mothers they never knew, mothers revived only to face the guilt of a debt they never chose, and a society clinging to the illusion that obligation could be engineered into justice. Whether this world will ever break free from its own logic remains uncertain. But one question echoes through every generation born into its design. What is the worth of a life if its preservation demands the sacrifice of another's freedom?